The great meeting hall on Nexus Prime had never seen so many different alien faces filled with the same emotion. Fear. Pure, cold fear that made even the bravest warriors shake inside their shells, scales, and skin. Ambassador Velthar of the Bow Crystal Collective stood at his speaking platform. His blue crystal body glowed dimly as he spoke to the crowd. Fellow beings of the galaxy, we face our darkest hour. The humans have taken 12 more star systems this month alone. A wave of worried whispers swept through the hall. The hegemony representative, a tall being with 6 arms, slammed one fist on his table. 12 systems in 1 month. At this rate, they will own half the galaxy within 5 years. They are not like us, added the spider-like delegate from the void colonies. Other species fight for resources, for territory, for survival. Humans fight because they enjoy it. They have turned war into an art form. Far away from this meeting, Admiral Kang Tae-ho stood on the bridge of his flagship. The TCS Indomitable was the largest warship humanity had ever built. Its weapons could destroy entire moons, and its shields could survive a direct hit from a star's explosion. Kang looked out at the stars through the main window. He was 45 years old, with graying hair and scars on his hands from his younger days as a fighter pilot. Those scars reminded him of every battle he had fought to bring humanity to where it stood today. Admiral, his second-in-command, approached. We have received new orders from Earth Command. Kang turned around. What are our orders, Captain Shin? We are to move to the Kepler sector. Intelligence reports show 3 alien fleets gathering there. They think they can stop our expansion. A small smile crossed Kang's face. 3 fleets. How many ships total? Approximately 800 vessels, sir. And we have 120 ships in our battle group. Kang nodded. Good odds. The aliens still do not understand us. They think war is about numbers. They will learn otherwise. The reputation of Admiral Kang Tae-ho was known across the galaxy. He was the man who had broken the siege of Kepler 442, where alien forces had surrounded a human colony for 6 months. When Kang arrived with his fleet, he did not attack the siege ships directly. Instead, he attacked their supply lines, their home bases, and their families. Within 2 weeks, the alien commanders begged for peace. He was also the hero of the Battle of the Crimson Nebula. 30 alien species had joined together to create the largest fleet in galactic history. They were certain they could crush the human expansion once and for all. Kang met them with only 50 ships. But those 50 ships moved like dancers, struck like lightning, and fought like demons. When the battle ended, only 12 alien ships escaped to tell the tale. Back on Mars, Captain Lee Dobbin walked through the halls of the War College. She was 38 years old, shorter than most people expected for such a famous military leader. But her mind was sharper than any sword ever made. Today we will study the Battle of Titan's Gate, she told her class of young officers. Can anyone tell me why the Zephyrian Empire lost that battle? A young lieutenant raised his hand. They had more ships, better weapons, and knew the territory. But they lost because they fought like Zephyrians, not like humans. Correct, Dobbin smiled. The Zephyrians are a proud species. They believe in honor, in fair fights, in giving their enemies a chance to surrender. These are beautiful ideas. They are also completely useless in real war. She walked to the large screen showing a map of the battle. Humans understand a simple truth. War is not about being fair. War is about winning. And to win, you must be willing to do whatever your enemy is not willing to do. The students listened carefully. Many of them would soon command their own ships, fight their own battles. They needed to understand what made humanity so successful in space. The Zephyrians expected us to meet their main fleet in open battle, Dobbin continued. Instead, we attacked their supply ships, their medical vessels, their troop transports. We targeted their weakest points instead of their strongest. When their main fleet finally found us, they were already beaten. Meanwhile, in a small research station orbiting a dead world called Echo 7, Dr. Park Soo-jin was dealing with a very different kind of problem. She was a scientist, not a soldier. At 42 years old, she had spent her life studying the human mind and how it worked. The research station was quiet and peaceful. Only 12 people lived there studying strange phenomena in deep space. But Dr. Park had recently received her most unusual case ever. "Bora," she called softly as she entered the main lab. "Are you ready for today's tests?" A small girl looked up from where she was sitting on the floor. Kim Bora was only 8 years old with dark hair and large, serious eyes. She had been found drifting in space 2 years ago, the only survivor of a colony ship that had been destroyed by raiders. "The soldiers are here again," Bora said quietly, looking at an empty corner of the room. Dr. Park followed her gaze but saw nothing. "What soldiers, Bora?" "The ones who died at Kepler 442. They want to tell Admiral Kang something important, but he cannot hear them." This was not the first time Bora had mentioned seeing people who were not there. Most doctors would have called it trauma from losing her family, but Dr. Park had noticed something strange. Every time Bora described these invisible soldiers, she gave details about battles that had actually happened. Details that an 8-year-old girl should not know. "What do they want to tell the Admiral?" Dr. Park asked, making notes on her tablet. "They say the next battle will be different. The aliens are learning. They say someone is teaching the aliens how humans think." Dr. Park stopped writing. Bora had just described something that military intelligence had been worried about for months. There were signs that alien tactics were becoming more effective against human forces, but this information was classified at the highest levels. How could a child on a remote research station know about it? "Bora, how do you know these things?" The little girl looked at her with those serious eyes. "The dead soldiers tell me. They stay with us after they die. They want to help, but most people cannot see them or hear them." Dr. Park felt a chill run down her spine. If Bora was somehow actually communicating with deceased military personnel, if she could access their knowledge and memories, then she was far more than just a traumatized child. She was potentially the most valuable military asset humanity had ever discovered. "Bora," Dr. Park said carefully, "I think we need to run some new tests." The little girl nodded and returned to looking at the empty corner. "The soldiers say that is a good idea. They say big changes are coming and everyone needs to be ready, as..." Dr. Park prepared her equipment. She wondered what she had stumbled upon. Outside the research station, the galaxy continued to fear humanity's growing military power. But none of them knew about the small girl who spoke to the dead, who might hold secrets that could change everything. The reputation of Earth's armies was built on victories won by brilliant commanders like Admiral Kang and strategic minds like Captain Lee. But perhaps their greatest weapon was sitting in a quiet research station, playing with invisible friends who had died in service to humanity. The galaxy feared Earth's armies, but they had not yet met the child raised by ghosts. 2 years had passed since Dr. Park Soo-jin first met Kim Bora. The little girl was now 10 years old, but she still spent most of her time talking to people no one else could see. The research station had become her home, and the scientists had become her family. But Bora was not like other children. Every morning she would sit in the main observation room and look out at the stars. To anyone watching, she appeared to be alone, but Dr. Park knew better. Bora was having conversations with invisible companions, nodding and shaking her head as if listening to important information. "Good morning, Bora," Dr. Park said as she entered the room with her morning coffee. "Good morning, Dr. Park," Bora replied without turning around. "Commander Jin says hello. He was in your father's unit during the Mars Rebellion." Dr. Park nearly dropped her coffee cup. Her father had died in the Mars Rebellion 15 years ago. She had never told Bora about him, and certainly never mentioned that he served under a Commander Jin. "Bora, how do you know about Commander Jin?" The girl finally turned around, her dark eyes serious as always. "He is standing right next to you. He says your father was very brave and saved many lives before he died." Dr. Park looked to her left but saw only empty space. Her hands began to shake slightly. "What else does he say?" "He says not to be sad. Your father is here too, but he is shy. He does not want to make you cry." This time Dr. Park did drop her coffee cup. It shattered on the floor, but she did not. Here. My father is here? Bora nodded. Many soldiers are here. They come to me because I can see them and hear them. They have things to say, but most people cannot listen. Dr. Park sat down heavily in a nearby chair. She had been studying Bora for 2 years, documenting her strange claims about invisible soldiers, but she had always assumed it was the girl's way of dealing with the trauma of losing her family. Now she was beginning to believe something far more incredible might be happening. Bora, can you ask Commander Jin to tell me something only he would know? Something about my father that no one else could know? The girl was quiet for a moment, tilting her head as if listening carefully. Then she smiled for the first time that morning. He says your father used to sing an old Earth song called Blue Moon whenever he was scared. He sang it the night before the final battle on Mars. Commander Jin says it helped keep everyone calm. Dr. Park began to cry. Her father had indeed loved that song. He used to sing it to her when she was little and had nightmares. She had never told anyone about it, not even her closest friends. How is this possible? She whispered. I do not know, Bora answered honestly. They have always been with me, ever since I was very small. At first I thought everyone could see them, but then I learned that I was different. Dr. Park wiped her eyes and tried to think like a scientist instead of a grieving daughter. Bora, these soldiers you see, do they only talk about personal things? Or do they tell you about military matters too? Oh, they talk about battles all the time, Bora said, turning back to look out at the stars. Captain Yoon is explaining right now how Admiral Kang made a mistake at the Battle of Titan's Gate. He says the Admiral was lucky the aliens were even more confused than we were. Dr. Park stood up quickly. The Battle of Titan's Gate had happened only 6 months ago. It was classified information. Even she, with her high security clearance, only knew basic details about it. What mistake did Admiral Kang make? Bora was quiet again, listening to her invisible companion. Captain Yun says the Admiral split his forces too early. The aliens almost broke through the left flank. Only Lieutenant Colonel Park's sacrifice saved the battle. But Lieutenant Colonel Park wishes the Admiral had listened to his warnings about the alien tactics. Dr. Park's mind was racing. If Bora was really communicating with dead soldiers, if she could access their knowledge and memories, then she possessed information that could be invaluable to the human military. But it also meant something that seemed impossible was actually happening. Bora, I need to contact some people. Important people. They need to know about your gift. The girl nodded. The soldiers think that is a good idea. They say dangerous. Times are coming. The aliens are learning how to fight like humans, and that makes them much more dangerous. 3 days later, Lieutenant Colonel Yoon Seok-jin arrived at Research Station Echo 7. He was a tall man with short black hair and several scars on his neck from shrapnel wounds. He had served in more battles than most soldiers ever see, and he had come to evaluate what Dr. Park claimed was the most important discovery in military history. So this is the child who supposedly talks to dead soldiers, he said, looking at Bora as she sat quietly in the corner of the lab. With respect, Colonel, she is not supposedly doing anything, Dr. Park replied firmly. She has provided detailed information about classified military operations, information she could not possibly know through normal means. Lieutenant Colonel Yoon was skeptical. He had seen many claims of supernatural abilities during his military career. Most turned out to be tricks or delusions. But his orders were clear. Evaluate the girl and determine if she could be useful to the war effort. Hello, Bora, he said, kneeling down to her level. I am Colonel Yoon. Dr. Park tells me you can see soldiers who have died in battle. Bora looked at him with those serious eyes. Yes, sir. There are 3 of them standing behind you right now. They served under your command at the siege of Kepler 442. Lieutenant Colonel Yoon felt his blood run cold. The siege of Kepler 442 had been his first major command. It had also been a disaster. 3 good officers had died because of his inexperience, and he had never forgiven himself for their deaths. What are their names? He asked quietly. Major Kim Jae-won, Captain Oh Min-ho, and Lieutenant Bae Soo-jin, Bora replied without hesitation. They do not blame you for what happened. They say you were young and did your best with what you knew at the time. Lieutenant Colonel Yoon's hands began to shake. Those were indeed the names of the 3 officers who had died under his command. But more than that, the question of blame had haunted him for years. He had wondered countless times if they hated him for the decisions that led to their deaths. What else do they say? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Bo-Ra tilted her head, listening to voices only she could hear. Major Kim says the alien tactics in that battle were unusual. They fought more like humans than like their own species. He thinks someone was teaching them. Captain O agrees. He says the aliens knew things about human psychology they should not have known. Lieutenant Colonel Yoon sat down hard in a nearby chair. What Bo-Ra was describing matched classified intelligence reports that had been troubling military commanders for months. There were signs that alien forces were adapting human tactics and strategies. But how could this child know about such sensitive information? Lieutenant Bay says something else, Bo-Ra continued. She says the aliens have found a human traitor, someone high in the military command structure, someone who is teaching them how we think and how we fight. Dr. Park and Lieutenant Colonel Yoon exchanged worried glances. If what Bo-Ra was saying was true, then humanity faced a threat far greater than anyone had imagined. A traitor in their own ranks could destroy everything they had built. Bo-Ra, Lieutenant Colonel Yoon said carefully. Do the soldiers know who this traitor is? The girl shook her head sadly. They only know what they knew when they died, but they are worried. They say more soldiers are dying because the aliens fight better now. They want to help stop the traitor, but they can only speak through me. Lieutenant. Colonel Yoon stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the stars. He had come to this research station expecting to debunk another wild claim. Instead, he had discovered something that could change the course of the war. A child who could speak to the dead. A living link to every soldier who had ever given their life in service to humanity. And if she was right about the traitor, then she might be their only hope of stopping a threat that could destroy them all. Dr. Park, he said finally, I need to contact Earth Command immediately. They need to know what we have found here. Bo-Ra continued to sit quietly in her corner, surrounded by invisible guardians who had died protecting the species they still served. The galaxy feared Earth's armies, but they had no idea that their greatest weapon might be a 10-year-old girl who carried the wisdom of the war dead. The real battle was just beginning. 2 years had passed since Lieutenant Colonel Yoon Seok-jin first met Bo-Ra. The girl was now 12 years old and living aboard Admiral Kang Tae-ho's flagship, the TCS Indomitable. What had started as a secret research project had become humanity's most valuable military asset. Dr. Park Soo-jin walked through the ship's corridors toward the special command center that had been built just for Bo-Ra. The room was quiet and peaceful, very different from the rest of the warship. Bo-Ra needed calm surroundings to communicate clearly with the spirits that surrounded her. Good morning, Bo-Ra, Dr. Park said as she entered the room. The girl looked up from where she was sitting at a small desk, drawing pictures of space battles. She had grown taller in the past 2 years, but her eyes were still as serious as ever. Around her, invisible to everyone else, stood the ghostly forms of hundreds of fallen soldiers. Good morning, Dr. Park, Bo-Ra replied. The spirits are restless today. They sense something big is going to happen. Before Dr. Park could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the ship. Red warning lights flashed as the ship's communication system crackled to life. All hands to battle stations. This is Admiral Kang. Enemy fleet detected. Prepare for combat. Dr. Park felt her stomach drop. They were near the Sigma Draconis system, far from any backup. If alien forces had found them here, they could be in serious trouble. Admiral Kang Tae-ho burst through the door, his face grim. Behind him came Lieutenant Colonel Yoon, now promoted to general after his work with Bo-Ra had proven so valuable. Bo-Ra, we need your help, Admiral Kang said without wasting time on greetings. Our sensors show a massive alien fleet approaching, 3 times larger than our forces. Do the spirits have any guidance for us? Bo-Ra closed her eyes and tilted her head, listening to voices only she could hear. When she opened her eyes again, her expression was troubled. The hegemony of Vel has been planning this attack for months. she said in a voice that seemed older than her 12 years. They used their fastest ships to get here first while their main fleet surrounded us from behind. We are trapped. Admiral Kang cursed under his breath. The hegemony of Vel were among the most dangerous alien enemies humanity faced. Their ships were fast and their weapons were powerful. Being outnumbered 3-1 by them was nearly a death sentence. What do the spirits suggest? General Yoon asked. Bo-Ra was quiet for a long moment, her young face concentrating hard. Around her, the invisible presences grew stronger and more numerous. Dr. Park could almost feel them in the room, though she still could not see them. Commander Lee Min-seok says to divide the fleet into 3 groups, Bo-Ra said suddenly. He died fighting the hegemony at the Battle of New Tokyo. He learned their weakness before he was killed. Admiral Kang leaned forward. What weakness? The EI. Hegemony ships are very fast, but they cannot turn quickly when they are moving at full speed. Commander Lee says if we make them chase us in a straight line, we can use that against them. But how? Admiral Kang asked. Even if we slow them down, we are still outnumbered. Bo-Ra's expression changed and her voice took on a different tone. Dr. Park had seen this before. Bo-Ra was no longer speaking as herself, but channeling the spirit of a dead commander. This is Admiral Park Hyun-soo, Bo-Ra said in a deeper voice. I died at the siege of Kepler 442, but I learned something important before my death. The hegemony fleet commanders do not trust each other. They compete for glory instead of working together. Admiral Kang's eyes widened. Admiral Park Hyun-soo had been his mentor, the man who taught him everything about space warfare. Hearing his voice, even through a 12-year-old girl, sent chills down his spine. Tell me your plan, old friend, Admiral Kang said quietly. Through Bo-Ra, the dead admiral explained a complex strategy. The human fleet would split into 3 groups and appear to flee in different directions. This would force the hegemony commanders to divide their forces to chase all 3 groups. But it was a trap. The human ships would lead their pursuers into a carefully planned ambush. The key is timing, Bo-Ra continued in Admiral Park's voice. Each group must arrive at the meeting point at exactly the same moment. If even one group is late, the plan will fail and we will all die. Admiral Kang nodded slowly. It was a dangerous plan, requiring perfect coordination across vast distances. But it was also brilliant. The kind of strategy only someone who had spent decades fighting the hegemony could devise. Bo-Ra, Admiral Kang said gently. Ask Admiral Park if he thinks this plan will work. The girl was quiet for a moment, then spoke in her own voice again. He says it will work if everyone follows orders exactly. But he also says that many ships will be lost. Many good people will die today. Admiral Kang felt the weight of command settle on his shoulders. Every military leader faced moments like this when they had to choose between certain death and possible victory at a terrible cost. Tell Admiral Park that I understand, he said finally. And tell him that his sacrifice will not be forgotten. The battle began an hour later. The human fleet split into 3 groups as planned, with Admiral Kang commanding the largest group himself. As they began to flee, the hegemony forces reacted exactly as the dead admiral had predicted. The alien commanders each chose a different human group to chase, dividing their overwhelming numbers. Bo-Ra remained in her special command center, surrounded by Dr. Park and a team of communication officers. Through her connection to the spirits, she could see the entire battle as if from above. Group 2 is falling behind schedule, she reported, her voice tense with concentration. Captain Nam needs to increase speed, or he will miss the rendezvous. Admiral, Kang's voice crackled over the communication system. Captain Nam, increase to maximum speed immediately. Sir, our engines cannot handle maximum speed for that long, came the reply. Bo-Ra suddenly spoke in a different voice. This is Chief Engineer Ko Sung-min. I died when my engines exploded at the Battle of Proxima. Captain Nam, reroute power from life support to the engines. You have enough air for 40 minutes. The communication channel was quiet for a moment. Then Captain Nam's voice returned, filled with determination. Understood. Rerouting power now. The battle continued for 3 hours. Bo-Ra channeled dozens of different spirits, each providing crucial information at exactly the right moment. Dead pilots warned of enemy ambushes. Fallen engineers suggested ways to repair damaged systems. Lost tacticians revealed weaknesses in alien formations. Dr. Park watched in amazement as the 12-year-old girl became a living link between the human fleet and every soldier who had ever died fighting for humanity. Through her, the wisdom and experience of the war dead guided their living comrades to victory. The climax came when all 3 human groups arrived at the rendezvous point simultaneously. The hegemony forces, spread thin and confused, found themselves caught in a deadly crossfire. Their ships, built for speed rather than heavy combat, began falling one by one. The hegemony commander is trying to retreat, Bo-Ra reported. But Commander Kim Dae-jung says not to let them escape. He says if even one ship returns home, they will know our tactics. Admiral Kang made the hard decision. All ships pursue and destroy. Leave no survivors. When the battle finally ended, the human fleet had won a complete victory. But the cost had been high. 37 human ships had been destroyed, and over 2,000 brave men and women had died. Bo-Ra sat quietly in her chair, tears streaming down her face. Around her, the ghostly forms of the newly fallen began to appear, joining the vast assembly of spirits that followed her everywhere. They are not angry about dying, she said softly to Dr. Park. They are proud that their sacrifice saved the fleet, but they miss their families already. Dr. Park put a gentle hand on the girl's shoulder. You did something amazing today, Bo-Ra. You saved thousands of lives. The girl looked up with those serious dark eyes. I did not save them. The spirits did. I just listened to what they had to say. Admiral Kang entered the command center, his face showing both triumph and sorrow. Bo-Ra, I want to thank you. Without your help, we would all be dead. The spirits want me to tell you something important, Bo-Ra said, wiping her eyes. This victory will make the aliens even more afraid of us. But fear makes people do dangerous things. They will try something desperate next time. What kind of desperate thing? General Yoon asked. Bo-Ra tilted her head, listening to voices from beyond. When she spoke again, her voice was filled with worry. They are going to gather every alien fleet in the galaxy. They want to attack Earth itself. They think if they destroy our homeworld, they can stop human expansion forever. The room fell silent. An attack on Earth would mean war on a scale never before seen. Billions of lives would be at stake. How long do we have? Admiral Kang asked. The spirits are not sure, Bo-Ra replied. But they think maybe 1 year. Maybe less. As the human fleet began its journey home, carrying news of both victory and the terrible threat to come, Bo-Ra continued to sit with her invisible guardians. The girl who could speak to the dead had proven her value in battle, but the greatest test was still ahead. The galaxy feared Earth's armies, but now those armies would face their ultimate challenge. And at the center of it all sat a 12-year-old girl who carried the voices of everyone who had ever died defending humanity. The war was far from over. 3 years had passed since the great victory at Sigma Draconis. Kim Bo-Ra was now 15 years old, but she looked much older. The weight of carrying so many voices from the dead had aged her beyond her years. Her dark hair had grown long, and her serious eyes seemed to hold the sadness of 1,000 lost battles. Dr. Park Soo-jin watched Bo-Ra from across the room in the special facility that had been built for her on Luna Base. The research station orbiting the dead world had been abandoned long ago. Now Bo-Ra lived in a place designed specifically for her needs, with quiet rooms where she could communicate with the ever-growing number of spirits that surrounded her. How are you feeling today, Bo-Ra? Dr. Park asked gently. The girl looked up from the book she was reading. Around her, invisible to everyone else, stood hundreds of ghostly figures, human soldiers, alien warriors, civilians who had died in the wars that raged across the galaxy. Over the years, Bo-Ra had discovered that her gift worked on any intelligent being, not just humans. I am tired, Bo-Ra replied honestly. The voices never stop now. Every day more spirits come to me. They all have things to say, warnings to give, regrets to share. Dr. Park felt her heart break a little. She had watched Bo-Ra grow from a quiet child into something far beyond normal human experience. The girl had become a living bridge between life and death, carrying the memories and wisdom of countless fallen beings. Perhaps we should reduce your duties, Dr. Park suggested. You do not have to help with every military operation. Bo-Ra shook her head. I cannot stop listening to them. They died protecting others. The least I can do is make sure their knowledge helps save more lives. A soft chime indicated someone was requesting entry to the room. General Yoon Seok-jin entered, his face showing the stress of recent events. He had been promoted again after the success at Sigma Draconis, and now he commanded all human military operations in the outer sectors. Bo-Ra, we need your guidance, he said without his usual polite greetings. The Final Alliance is moving faster than we expected. The Final Alliance. It was the name the remaining free alien species had given to their desperate coalition. Over the past 3 years, they had been gathering ships and weapons from across the galaxy. Their goal was simple: destroy Earth and end the human threat, forever. What have they done? Bo-Ra asked, though from the expression on the general's face she already suspected the answer would be bad. They have assembled the largest fleet in galactic history, General Yoon replied. Our long-range scouts count over 10,000 ships, battleships, carriers, dreadnoughts from dozens of different species. They are calling it the Fleet of Final Hope. Bo-Ra closed her eyes and listened to the voices that surrounded her. When she opened them again, her expression was grim. The spirits are very concerned, she said. They have never seen so many different alien species working together. The Fleet of Final Hope has weapons and tactics from civilizations that have been fighting each other for thousands of years. How long do we have? General Yoon asked. 6 months, maybe less, Bo-Ra replied. They are gathering at a staging area in the Void Nebula. Once they finish their preparations, they will move directly toward Earth. Admiral Kang Tae-ho entered the room at that moment. He was older now, with completely gray hair and new lines around his eyes. The years of constant warfare had taken their toll on all of humanity's military leaders. Bo-Ra, he said, sitting down across from her. I need to ask you something difficult. Our intelligence suggests that we cannot win this battle through conventional means. Even with your help, the numbers are simply too overwhelming. Bo-Ra nodded. She had been expecting this conversation. The spirits have been telling me the same thing. They say this battle will be different from all the others. Different how? Dr. Park asked. Bo-Ra was quiet for a long moment, listening to voices only. She could hear. Around her, the ghostly figures seemed to press closer as if they all had something urgent to say. They are divided, she said finally. Some of the spirits want to fight as we always have. They believe human courage and determination will find a way to win. But others say something different. What do the others say? Admiral Kang asked. They say the time has come to stop fighting altogether, Bo-Ra replied, her voice barely above a whisper. They say too many have died already on both sides. They want me to try something that has never been attempted before. General Yoon leaned forward. What kind of something? Bo-Ra looked directly at him, and for a moment he could almost see the weight of all the spirits she carried. They want me to speak not just to human dead, but to all the dead. Every alien who has died in this war, every civilian caught in the crossfire, every soldier on both sides who gave their life for their people. That sounds dangerous, Dr. Park said, her voice filled with concern. You have never attempted to communicate with so many spirits at once. It is dangerous, Bo-Ra agreed. But the spirits think it might be the only way to stop this war before it destroys everything we have built. Admiral Kang stood up and walked to the window that looked out over the lunar surface. In the distance, Earth hung in space like a blue jewel. It was beautiful and peaceful from this distance, but he knew that in 6 months it might become a battlefield. Bo-Ra, what exactly are you proposing? The girl took a deep breath before answering. The spirits believe that the dead from both sides want the same thing, for the killing to stop. If I can channel all of them at once, if I can let them speak, through me to the living, maybe we can make both humans and aliens understand that this war has gone too far. That is a beautiful idea. General Yoon said carefully. But how would you reach the alien fleet? They will not listen to messages from us. Bora smiled for the first time in months. The spirits have a plan for that too. But it will require the human fleet to do something very difficult. Something that goes against everything we have learned about warfare. What? Admiral Kang asked. When the final alliance arrives to attack Earth, our fleet must not fight back immediately. Instead, we must position ourselves where both sides can see and hear what the spirits have to say. We must give them a chance to listen to their own dead. The room fell silent. What Bora was suggesting was incredibly risky. If the plan failed, Earth would be defenseless against the largest alien fleet ever assembled. Bora, Dr. Park said gently, are you sure about this? The strain of channeling so many spirits at once could kill you. The girl nodded solemnly. I know. The spirits have warned me about that. But they also say that if we do nothing, millions more will die in the battle for Earth. Maybe billions. Admiral Kang returned to his seat and looked at the 15-year-old girl who had become humanity's most important military advisor. In her young face, he could see the wisdom of ages, the accumulated knowledge of everyone who had ever died in service to their people. What do you need from us? He asked finally. I need you to trust me, Bora replied. And I need you to be prepared to make the hardest decision a military commander can make. When the time comes, you will have to choose between fighting and taking a chance on peace. Over the following weeks, preparations began for what everyone knew would be humanity's greatest test. The human fleet gathered near Earth, while Bora spent her time learning to communicate with more and more spirits from different species. Dr. Park watched with growing concern as the girl grew thinner and more tired with each passing day. The effort of maintaining contact with so many different types of consciousness was taking a terrible toll on her young body. Bora, perhaps we should find another way, Dr. Park suggested one evening as they sat together in the quiet observation room. There is no other way, Bora replied, looking out at the stars. The spirits from both sides are clear about that. This war has created too much fear and hatred. The only way to end it is to let the dead speak for themselves. And what do the dead want to say? Bora was quiet for a long time before answering. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of countless lost souls. They want to say that they are tired of dying. They want to say that the living have forgotten what they were fighting for. And they want to say that it is time to choose a different path. As the days passed and the final Alliance fleet drew closer to Earth, Bora prepared for the greatest challenge of her young life. She would attempt to channel the voices of millions of war dead from dozens of different species, all speaking with one message. The galaxy had feared Earth's armies for years. Soon they would meet the child raised by ghosts and discover that sometimes the most powerful weapon is the simple truth, spoken by those who can no longer lie. The final battle was approaching, but it might not be a battle at all. It might be something far more difficult and far more important. A moment of truth that could change the galaxy forever. The final Alliance fleet arrived at the edge of Earth's solar system like a storm made of metal and fire. 10,000 ships from dozens of different alien species formed a wall of destruction that stretched across space. Admiral Kang Tae-ho stood on the bridge of his flagship, looking at the sensor readings that showed humanity's doom approaching. Admiral, we count 10,300 enemy vessels, his communications officer reported. Our fleet has 800 ships. Admiral, Kang nodded grimly. Even with Bora's help, even with all the tactical advantages they had gained over the years, these numbers were impossible to overcome. But he had made his choice weeks ago. He would trust the 16-year-old girl who spoke to the dead. In her special chamber aboard the flagship, Kim Bora sat in the center of a circle that had been cleared of all furniture. Around her, visible only to her enhanced perception, stood thousands upon thousands of ghostly figures, human soldiers, alien warriors, civilians from both sides who had died in the wars that had raged across the galaxy. Dr. Park Soo-jin watched from the observation deck above, her heart breaking as she saw how frail Bora had become. The girl was thin and pale, her dark hair now showing streaks of premature gray. The effort of maintaining contact with so many spirits was slowly killing her. "Bora, are you ready?" Admiral Kang asked through the communication system. The girl looked up with eyes that seemed to hold the pain of the entire galaxy. "The spirits are gathering, Admiral. I can feel them coming from across space and time. Every being who has died in this war wants to speak." "How long do you need?" "Not long," Bora replied. "But when I begin, you must do exactly as we planned. Position the fleet where both sides can see us clearly. Do not fire unless I tell you to." Admiral Kang took a deep breath. Everything they had built, everything humanity had achieved, now depended on a plan that seemed impossible. But he had seen Bora work miracles before. "All ships assume formation Delta 7, he commanded. "Move to coordinates that will place us between Earth and the enemy fleet. Do not charge weapons. Repeat, do not charge weapons." The human fleet moved into position, placing themselves in what appeared to be a helpless formation between the alien armada and their home world. To any outside observer, it looked like surrender. The final Alliance fleet slowed its approach, clearly confused by the human response. Their commanders had expected a desperate last stand, not this strange positioning that seemed to offer no tactical advantage. Bora closed her eyes and reached out with her mind, calling to every spirit that had ever died in the galactic wars. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Ghostly figures began appearing around her by the hundreds, then by the thousands. Human soldiers from every battle humanity had ever fought stood shoulder to shoulder with alien warriors from species that had been enemies for generations. Civilians who had died in orbital bombardment stood next to pilots who had crashed their ships to save others. The chamber filled with the presence of the dead from across the galaxy. "I can see them," Dr. Park whispered, tears streaming down her face. For the first time in all the years she had known Bora, she could actually see the spirits that surrounded the girl. They were translucent and shimmering, but they were there. Bora opened her eyes, and when she spoke, her voice carried the power of millions of souls. "People of the galaxy, living and dead, hear me now." Her words were broadcast on every communication channel, reaching both the human fleet and the alien armada. But more than that, they seemed to reach into the minds and hearts of everyone who heard them. "I am Kim Bora, and I speak for those who can no longer speak for themselves. I carry the voices of every being who has died in this war, from every species, from every world." On the alien command ships, hardened warriors stopped what they were doing and listened. The girl's voice seemed to come from everywhere at once, and with it came the presence of their own fallen comrades. "The dead have a message for the living," Bora continued, her young voice now carrying the weight of ages. "They say this war has gone too far. They say you have forgotten what you were fighting for." Through Bora, the spirits began to speak individually. A human captain who died at Kepler 442 addressed his alien counterpart who had killed him, forgiving him and asking him to remember his own children. An alien warrior who fell at Sigma Draconis spoke to the human soldiers who had defeated him, praising their courage while mourning the friends he would never see again. Admiral Kang watched in amazement as the communication channels filled with messages from both fleets. Human and alien commanders were beginning to speak to each other, not with threats and demands, but with questions and confusion. "What is happening to us?" transmitted the commander of the Hegemony flagship. "We can hear our dead," replied Admiral Kang simply. "And they are telling us things we need to hear." Through Bora, the spirits of both sides began to tell the same story. They spoke of the fear that had driven this conflict beyond all reason. They told of how defensive actions had become aggressive expansion, how protection had become conquest, how survival had become domination. "The humans were never the monsters you believed them to be," spoke the spirit of an alien diplomat through Bora's voice. "They fought fiercely because they were afraid of being wiped out like so many other species. And the aliens were never the evil invaders humans thought they were," added the ghost of a human general. "They attacked because they feared human expansion would destroy their homes and families." The revelation struck both fleets like a physical blow. For years, each side had seen the other as monsters bent on destruction. Now, through the voices of their own dead, they learned that both sides had been driven by the same emotion: fear. But Bora was not finished. Drawing on strength she did not know she possessed, she channeled the collective voice of all the war dead at once. Enough! The spirits roared through her, their combined voice shaking the hulls of ships across the solar system. We have watched you turn our deaths into excuses for more killing. We died to protect our people, not to fuel endless war. The effect was immediate and stunning. On ships throughout both fleets, hardened warriors began to weep as they heard the voices of fallen friends and family members. The dead were not calling for vengeance, they were calling for peace. The cycle must end here, Bora said, her own voice returning as the spirit stepped back. Too many have died already. Too many families have been broken. Too many children have grown up without parents. She looked directly at the camera that was broadcasting her words across the galaxy. I was one of those children. I lost my family when I was very young. But the spirits of the dead took me in and raised me. They taught me that death is not the end, and that the greatest honor you can give to those who have fallen is to make sure their sacrifice meant something. Bora stood up, swaying slightly from exhaustion but managing to remain upright. Human fleet, lower your shields and power down your weapons. Admiral Kang hesitated for only a moment before giving the order. Across the human formation, ships began shutting down their defensive systems. Final Alliance fleet, I ask you to do the same. Let us show the galaxy that we can choose a different path. For long minutes, nothing happened. Then, one by one, alien ships began powering down their weapons. The massive fleet that had come to destroy Earth slowly transformed from a force of war into something unprecedented, a gathering of former enemies choosing peace. The Final Alliance commander, an ancient being from the Crystal Collective, transmitted a message that reached both fleets. Child who speaks for the dead, we have heard the voices of our fallen. They tell us we have been fools, driven by fear into a war that serves no one. What do you propose we do now? Bora smiled for the first time in months. Around her, the spirits of the war dead began to fade, their message delivered and their purpose fulfilled. We start over, she said simply. We talk instead of fight. We try to understand each other instead of destroying each other. And we remember that everyone in this galaxy, human and alien alike, just wants to protect the people they love. Gar. Park rushed down to the chamber as Bora collapsed from exhaustion. The girl had given everything she had to deliver the message of the dead, and her body had finally reached its limit. Did it work? Bora whispered as Dr. Park helped her to a medical bed. Yes, Dr. Park replied, tears of joy streaming down her. Furkir. The war is over, both fleets are standing down. You did it, Bora, you ended the war. The girl smiled weakly. Not me, the spirits did it. I just listened to what they had to say. In the days that followed, representatives from both the human fleet and the Final Alliance began meeting to discuss terms for a lasting peace. It would not be easy. There was much anger and mistrust to overcome, but for the first time in years, beings from across the galaxy were talking instead of shooting. Kim Bora spent weeks recovering from her ordeal, but she lived. The spirits that had surrounded her for so long gradually faded away, their message delivered and their purpose complete. She was still special, still able to communicate with the dead when needed, but the constant presence of thousands of ghosts was gone. What will you do now? Dr. Park asked as Bora sat in a garden on Earth, looking up at stars that no longer held the threat of war. I think I would like to go to school, Bora said with a laugh. I have never had a normal education, and maybe I can help others understand what the dead taught me. Years later, Ambassador Kim Bora stood before the Galactic Peace Council, representing not just humanity, but all the species that had learned to work together instead of fight. The spirits still visited her sometimes, but now they spoke of hope instead of war. The galaxy had feared Earth's armies, but they had learned that humanity's greatest strength was not their weapons or their tactics. It was their ability to listen, to learn, and to choose compassion over conquest. And at the heart of it all was a girl who had been raised by ghosts, who had taught an entire galaxy that sometimes the wisest voices are those of the dead, speaking for a future they would never see.